Welcome back to the Power and the Glory. Today's scripture is taken from the book of Acts, chapter 13, verse 38. Before I read the scripture, please like, share, and subscribe. It does make a huge difference to the Google algorithm. Thank you to my existing subscribers for your ongoing support. I really do appreciate it. That being said, I'll read the scripture now. Therefore, my friends, I want you to know that through Jesus, the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. So this is a pivotal verse in Paul's sermon at Antioch, proclaiming that through the sacrifice of Jesus, forgiveness of sins is offered to everyone, Jews and Gentiles alike. So this is a controversial statement because up to now, forgiveness of sins, or at least in part, has been through good works and adherence to religious legalism powered by the law of Moses, also known as the Mosaic Law. So this message is new and challenging then, that forgiveness of sins is not through performance or practices or deeds, but through an actual person, Jesus Christ himself. So the context behind the scriptures, at the time of the scripture, Paul and Barnabas are describing the significance of Jesus' resurrection. This scripture is part of Paul's first recorded sermon in Acts, where he was preaching to both Jews and Gentiles alike in the synagogue. So that being said, let's now look at the scripture in a bit more detail. Starting off with, forgiveness is now exclusively through Jesus Christ, not through practices, good works, or personal performance. Forgiveness is seen within the scripture as being gifted by God, not earned. It's received, a divine gift of favor, given to the undeserving of humanity via the grace of God, not won through good deeds or practices. It shows the limitations of the old Mosaic law. The Mosaic law was able to identify sin, but could not absolve the guilty or penalty of their penalty of that sin. The law was a custodian, not the final source of evaluation for salvation, but Jesus is now seen as that very source of salvation itself, so the game has changed. Worshipping Jesus creates the establishment of a new covenant. This new way of worship is in effect the establishment of a new covenant between man and God, with Jesus at its center rather than the church or laws. It's in layman's terms a life-changing spiritual upgrade. Justification is now comprehensive. Believers are justified, declared righteous, acquitted of all charges through Jesus. Now they are free from all their sins, covering the entirety of their sin rather than just partially their sins, as was the case in the Mosaic law. Justification is also now through faith, not works. That's a big change. The only necessary requirement to receive this new spiritual freedom and forgiveness in belief is through Jesus, belief in Jesus himself, and a repentant heart rather than adherence to religious practices, i.e. Legalism. Jesus provides freedom. Believers now experience freedom from condemnation, fear of death, and sin, which burden them down through Mosaic law, through a personal relationship with Jesus. In this new personal relationship, the believers are only answerable to Jesus himself. So Paul has effectively taken his believers on a journey. Through Acts, Paul has managed to link the achievements and scripture of the Old Testament with Jesus, announcing to them that a new order is now in place. He establishes that the practice of justification through faith, not works, was the newly approved and divinely backed way to onwardly interact with God.